With great power comes great responsibility. But what if that responsibility becomes a curse? A curse that pulls you into the dark depths of eternal suffering and choices, where every decision is the lesser of two evils. There are no easy paths here, only an endless struggle against inner demons, fears, and doubts, the cost of which is often someone's life. And in this video, we'll talk about fates that are far worse than ordinary death. Humanity fears mutants not just because of their powerful abilities, but because of the threat they pose by potentially upsetting the balance of power in the world. What's even more agonizing is that the X-Men find themselves trapped between two warring forces, humans who hate them, and radical mutants who seek to enslave or destroy humanity. The X-Men are outcasts in this world, as neither of the warring sides acknowledges them to mutants. They are traitors for defending their oppressors, and to humans, they are a potential threat that humanity fights in countless ways, including using deadly sentinels to hunt and eliminate anyone with the X gene. Living in a world where you are hunted endlessly isn't just surviving. It's waking up every day to the weight of gazes filled with contempt, hatred, and fear. With every step, every move, there's persecution. With every look, judgment. The scariest part is that you can't even be yourself, because who you are is already a crime. You are not a human being. You're something else, and you're not welcome here. No matter what you do, all you get in return is humiliation, insults, and the ruthless pain of knowing you will never be accepted, never understood. It's not life, it's endless torment, where every day is not just a fight against enemies, but a struggle with who you become and how the world sees you. And in this universe, surrounded by loneliness and suffering, death no longer seems so terrifying or painful, because at least it would put an end to the endless agony. The City Fall comic arc is a story about how one person can destroy everything you ever loved and leave you with a void that can't be filled. During a fight with the Foot Clan, Leonardo was separated from his family and captured by Shredder. Shredder, using Kitsune, infiltrated the deepest corners of the turtle's mind, slowly and subtly dismantling everything that once made up the core of his being. Kitsune put him into a trance, where Splinter, who had always been a symbol of fatherly love and guidance for Leonardo, became a monster. He tormented his student, forcing him to fight soulless creatures, giving him no chance to win. In these horrifying visions, Leonardo couldn't find a way out. He kept encountering more and more terrifying suffering. Splinter, the one he loved and respected, not only betrayed him, but also killed his brothers. With each new nightmare, Leonardo lost more and more touch with reality. He heard that voice, but it was no longer the voice of the father he cherished. It was a voice full of contempt, relentlessly repeating that he had disappointed him. In his darkest moments, Shredder reached out a helping hand. And so Leonardo, twisted and broken, became the right hand of his greatest enemy. Everything he had once known about himself vanished, dissolved in an ocean of pain and fear. In his eyes, there was no longer any light of love, only a dark, all-consuming flame of rage. What is it like to learn that you're nothing more than a pathetic imitation of a human, a copy of someone who was created not for life, but to fulfill someone else's purpose? Mr. Sinister created a clone of Jean Grey, who became known as Meline Prior. He fabricated a false backstory for his creation, all for one purpose: to create an incredibly promising mutant through the genetic fusion of Jean Grey and Scott Summers. After Jean Grey's death, Sinister manipulated everything so that Summers would fall in love with her clone, since Meline reminded him of his lost love. Afterwards, they got married and had a child, who would later be known as Cable. But soon, their perfect relationship fell apart. Scott rarely came home and couldn't stop thinking about Jean. But the worst part was that Meline found out Jean Grey was fine, and that she was nothing more than a clone of Cyclops' great love. Scott had married her only because she resembled Jean. Meline Prior lost everything: her family, her identity, and her self-respect. That's her tragedy. A brilliant scientist working for Shredder paid too high a price for his mistakes. His brain was the only thing that mattered to Shredder, and his body was subjected to all sorts of punishments. For each mistake, the scientist lost a piece of his body until only his head remained. And so, when it seemed that Baxter could no longer be dehumanized more, could not be punished more, the Stockman was deprived of his face and skull, leaving only his brain and one eye. The pathetic remains of his body were locked in a jar, but even in such a hopeless situation, he did not give up. The scientist created a new body for himself, transferred his mind into it, but soon faced another nightmare. The body began to decompose, and madness slowly consumed him. Even after death, his soul did not find peace. Baxter was found. His brain was taken and resurrected in the new shell. And that was truly horrifying. Mark Grayson, the son of the alien Nolan Grayson and Earthwoman Deborah, knew from a young age that his father was a member of the Viltrumites, a noble race of superhumans whose planet thrived in a perfect world free from disease, war, and violence. Nolan told his son that his mission was to help less advanced races achieve the same kind of perfection. For this reason, he chose to become Earth's protector. However, as Mark grew older, he discovered the horrifying truth. His father wasn't a noble protector, but a ruthless alien conqueror. Nolan destroyed the Guardians of the Globe, the planet's strongest heroes, and offered Mark the chance to join him in taking over the world, claiming that human lives meant nothing. His father also revealed that Mark would outlive everyone he loved due to their shared genetics. When Mark refused, Nolan showed him the full extent of his destructive power. Mark's world collapsed, and his life would never be the same. From that point on, he was thrust into endless battles, fighting opponents far stronger than him. He endured a deadly virus, fell into a coma, watched his loved one die, and confronted alternate versions of himself when a mad scientist put a bounty on his head. And all of this was just a fraction of the cruelty young Mark had to face. Dylan Brock's life has been filled with pain and suffering from the very beginning. He was created by symbiotes as a secret weapon in their war against their god, Null. So, in reality, Dylan Brock is the son of Eddie Brock and Wang and Venom. Dylan's mother took her own life, and his upbringing was handled by his grandfather. When Dylan finally managed to reunite with his father, he witnessed his death several times. However, Eddie was later resurrected. But the real torment began when he realized that he had become a part of a conflict involving beings with superpowers. At this moment, he realized that he was a weapon created by the symbiotes to fight their god, and at a young age, he became the host for Venom. As a teenager, he often has to make adult decisions in the harsh world of superheroes, which only intensifies his inner conflicts. Dylan is still a teenager, which means his psyche is still developing, making him emotionally unstable. This is a time when a person undergoes significant changes, transitioning from childhood to adulthood. Dylan faced a series of trials during this period. He met the god of the symbiotes, a being that symbiotes fear to the core. He witnessed his father's death multiple times, fought alongside superheroes on several occasions, and battled an alternate version of his father who wanted to kill him. Dylan also uncovered dark secrets about Venom, including all horrific murders and crimes committed by the symbiote. Dylan also fought the original version of Eddie Brock to prevent a future where his father became a megavillain, a god of symbiotes who turned to evil. Dylan Brock's life is worse than death, as from a young age, he was thrust into a brutal struggle, deprived of peace and love. His existence has been filled with loss, inner conflict, and tragic revelations, including his encounter with the dark secrets of the symbiotes and his battle with his own father, who became a threat to the entire universe. As a teenager with an unstable psyche, Dylan was forced to make adult decisions, enduring the pain of loss, moral dilemmas, and constant battles, making his life unbearable and devoid of hope for a peaceful future. By the way, I made a whole episode dedicated to symbiotes, so if you're interested, be sure to check it out. In this story from the dark multiverse, Batman was forced to break his main rule: do not kill. The fact is that the Joker decided to destroy Gotham and committed terrible crimes. He again and again played out before Batman's eyes the tragedy that deprived him of a happy childhood. The clown prince of crime destroyed parents one by one, and with the help of his toxin turned children into his crazy puppets. Gathering his last strength, Bruce Wayne freed himself, and with the rage suppressed all these years pounced on Mr. J. He put into each of his blows the pain of children who had just lost their parents. He tried to beat the crap out of the Joker, but when the bleeding Joker declared that he couldn't be stopped, that Batman didn't have the guts to finish him off, then Bruce broke his rule. He did not guess that by killing the Joker, he would be exposed to his toxin. The Joker pulled off his final and cruelest prank. He got under the skin of his worst enemy, turning Batman into the Joker, who subsequently did an excellent job of playing his role. The champion of justice, friend and pillar of the superhero community, turned into a real butcher. The Batman who laughs, or rather the Bruce Wayne buried deep inside him, was doomed to a fate without a choice. For the Dark Knight, who has always fought tyranny, violence, and madness, this is a tragic transformation because his identity and principles are destroyed. He becomes what he has fought against all his life, mentally and physically. Imagine Bruce realizing that he is losing his humanity, how he desperately tries to fight this horror, but gradually loses control, turning into the one for whom he felt only contempt, anger, and disgust. The most brutal version of Gotham's guardian angel reduced his world to ruins and continued to sow chaos even beyond his multiverse. When Bruce fully transformed into the Batman who laughs, he devised a particularly cruel fate for Superman and his family. He told Clark, Lois, and John about a modified black kryptonite that clouds the mind and turns into a beast. When Batman used it on the superhero, Clark, not fully understanding what was happening to him, destroyed everything he loved. First his family, then himself. Imagine what it was like for Clark. The moment he realized that right now, unable to stop himself, he was killing the woman he loved, Lois. He was destroying the fruit of his love, his son Jonathan. What was it like to be an invisible spectator in his own body, every hand, every cell turning into an instrument of death, and his mind screaming but unable to stop this nightmare? And what did John experience? He also couldn't control himself and took part in the murder of his mother. The last thing he remembered before his death was his father's eyes, in which pain and hatred merged. And for Lois Lane, it was not just death. She died with the thought that the one she loved with all her heart, whom she was always ready to support, became her executioner. The scientist Miles Warren, also known as the Jackal, fell in love with one of his students, Gwen Stacy, who at the time was Peter Parker's girlfriend. When Gwen was killed by the Green Goblin, Miles blamed Spider-Man for her death. Obsessed with the idea of cloning, he sought a way to bring his beloved back and take revenge for her death. Thus, the clone of Spider-Man was born, a creature sculpted from false memories and delusions, with a soul besieged by hopelessness. Initially, like any clone, Ben was created to obey someone else's desires. This lie robbed him of the ability to self-discover and establish his own identity. He was convinced that he was a real Peter Parker, carrying his memories, his experiences, and even pain. In the end, he discovered he was nothing more than a copy, strange, absurd, pieced together from fragments of someone else's life. He ran in search of himself. Years of wandering led him to do whatever it took to become a separate individual and present himself as a true hero in the form of the Scarlet Spider. But then came the moment when they started to consider him the real one, and Parker the clone. Changes came once again, and the Scarlet Spider began to build his own life. He finally felt like a complete person. He even sacrificed his life for Spider-Man, dying in the arms of the original, whose life he had tried so hard to replicate. Ben realized that everything had been a lie. Even death couldn't give him release. His life had been nothing but a series of attempts to be someone else. In the comic story The Clone Conspiracy, we learn that Ben's death was not the end. After Ben's death, the Jackal collected his remains and revived him. But what happened next is truly shocking. The resurrected Ben, Reilly, suffered from cellular degradation. To rid him of it, the mad scientist subjected the poor guy to endless, cruel tortures in an attempt to also determine the limits of his abilities. In moments of despair, Ben thought about the people who were counting on him, and then realized that all these people were actually relying on the original Spider-Man, not him, which meant that in addition to the colossal physical pain, there was also emotional pain. Just think about it. Ben was killed more than 20 times, in a variety of twisted ways. And it seems like it can't get any worse, right? But Ben noticed something even more terrifying. If at the very beginning of the chain of deaths his life flashed before his eyes, then only deaths began to flicker, absorbing all the bright moments and images of loved ones. Just imagine the horror experienced by this character, who went through the line of 26 painful deaths. What kind of deformation did his psyche undergo? Every time Ben died, his consciousness descended into a new level of despair and madness. The psychological trauma resulting from this made his existence worse than death, as he didn't experience just one death, but many, each of which was impossible to forget. From the moment of his birth, Stanley Carter's life was doomed. His parents were drug addicts, and his father died before he was born. His upbringing was left to his grandmother and cruel grandfather on his father's side. The grandfather, a religious fanatic, blamed his son for abandoning the faith, and unable to punish him, he took out his anger on his grandson. A childhood filled with violence and alienation left deep psychological scars. When his grandfather died, Stanley witnessed the hermit, the Sin Eater, who was meant to perform a dark ritual, absorbing all the sins of the deceased to ensure his place in paradise. What he witnessed had a profound impact on the boy. As he grew older, his body began to split into two personalities: himself, Carter, and his dark alter ego, known as the Sin Eater, obsessed with destroying those who abuse their power. Stanley found himself trapped in an eternal struggle for control over his own body, and when, due to the actions of his dark self, he ended up in hell, it only got worse. The images of his past subjected him to physical and emotional torment until Carter was resurrected by the kindred twins. They convinced him that the Sin Eater was necessary for this world, to save the lost souls of hopeless sinners. For this reason, they supplied him with an enchanted shotgun, which not only allowed him to absorb the sins of criminals, but also their powers. Furthermore, the victims of this artifact experienced a profound sense of remorse. Here you have Carter, who absorbed the power of Juggernaut and became a serious challenge for Spider-Man. Becoming a vessel for the sins of others, Stanley felt them slithering through his veins like a snake, twisting and desperately trying to break free. These sins tormented him, giving him neither rest nor peace. Imagine becoming a vessel for such abomination, horror, and nothing more. When he learned that the kindred twins had manipulated him to destroy Spider-Man, Stanley finally gave in and committed suicide. Later, he rose from the dead and again became a vessel for sins. His further fate remains unknown. In what order would you arrange the tragedies mentioned above? I'd be grateful if you share your thoughts in the comments. What other fates from comics, movies, or animated series would fit this format? It's quite possible that some of your examples might appear in one of the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episodes.